we're going to keep the train moving here. We don't have a break between these two sessions, and I know we're just a couple of minutes over, but we're going to move on to what I have lovingly called over the years our content camp with one of my most favorite people, Brena Nath with Housing Wire. She's an author at Housing Wire, and she's also the HW Plus managing editor. If you're not a member of HW Plus, you definitely should be. This is my shameless plug that you should subscribe to Housing Wire, but also be a member of HW Plus. It's just really great real estate industry information, lots of like tips and tricks and great thought leaders and all kinds of stuff. And so Brena is going to talk to us today about content, where to find it, how to think about it, all of that stuff. And hopefully you guys will have some really great questions for her here. And Brena, thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'm excited to be here. Well, I'll go ahead and kind of kick off. I wasn't able to join the 7 a.m. Session for me. I'm in Mountain Time, but I was reading through the comments and chats, and it looks like everyone had some really solid discussion. Was able to attend the last one. So excited to kind of dig deeper into content. I think the past few sessions were able to go over social media. I saw the marketing plans. And hopefully this quick 30-minute session is something that you guys can use to take away, as kind of the description says, like a very fast mini plan on how to get started and leave today and hopefully post something, which is exciting. A little bit of background on me. As Wayne said, I'm Brena Nath. I've been in the industry now for almost 10 years. And I think in the 10 years, we can all say we've watched, at least for those who are in the housing industry, watched the industry change and shift. We've watched marketing change, email change, social media change. We've watched new social media platforms come like Clubhouse, and then we've watched some slowly go away, and then the entrance of TikTok. So needless to say, there's a lot of content options out there. And so when I was going through this with Wayne, he gave me an hour, and then I pulled back to 45 minutes, and then I pulled back again to 30 minutes. And now that I was working on this presentation, I realized, there's a lot here. You could spend more than a day digging into content, digging into each platform and figuring out what are the nuances, what are the details of each platform that you need to know in order to get started. But so work at Housing Wire. Over the years, during this kind of session, we're going to dive into emails. We're going to dive into social media, video. All of those things are very important and very different. But before we dive in, I wanted to give people a little bit of call to action, because we want this to be more of a content camp, not so much me just talking to you guys. So I wanted everyone to kind of pause here for a moment. And I think I'm the only one on camera right now, but if you guys want to turn and take a selfie, I think one of the best ways to quickly get a thing across, a piece of content, something that you want to showcase, is to take a photo of you doing active lessons. So I'm going to do it with you guys. You guys can put in the chat if you did it or not. I'd recommend a selfie with you guys, but take just a quick photo, post it on LinkedIn, post it on Twitter, post it on Facebook. Easy piece of content right there. You're actively engaging, you're learning, you're in a conference, you're getting more knowledge. So let's take a picture together real fast. And I'll tag people in it. If everyone wants to smile. Okay. Hopefully you guys are able to take one too. But let's go on to the next slide. So as I kind of mentioned before, there's 3 big areas when it comes to content that we're at least going to dive into here. And then each of these have a lot of subsets. I think you could probably go to a lot of the sessions before me and even the sessions after me to figure out why is this important? Why do you need to be doing this? My heart here for this 30-minute session isn't to unpack things you already know. Hopefully at this point, you know a decent amount of social media, you know a decent amount of newsletters, but it's always changing. It's always turning. There's new updates. There's new information out there. So I'm hoping that I'm just going to kind of dig into the surface, the latest changes and updates that you need to know. So if you want to walk away from here today actively posting something, you have something to go with. So first one is email newsletters. Over my time at Housing Wire, I have letter emails, news campaigns. We also have individual newsletters for the lending industry. We have newsletters for the real estate industry, for our most super fans types of emails. And something that I think is really important to know about email is that email, more than ever before, is a product in itself. I included a quote in here from Jacob Donnelly. He's the GM of B2B marketing at the Morning Brew. If anyone follows the Morning Brew, I'd highly recommend not only for their news and their updates, but also just as a great example of what a good bar to set when it comes to email and the content being put out there. I obviously take things kind of from a news angle, but I'm also heavily involved on the marketing side of things, getting content, our sponsored content out there to the audience as well. But what's unique about this and why I highlight it is because personalities and the product of the email is more important than ever. The content is now at a place where people aren't stepping away. People aren't necessarily clicking out on a CTA to go somewhere else. So all the information that they need should be in there. All of the, stories, the things that are happening all in one email. So kind of make it a product itself, make it a personality of themselves, whether it's a person at your company, whether it's a certain topic that you want to focus on. Emails have now shifted into that area significantly. Then I also wanted to highlight video. Video is unique. I know on this thing, we kind of talk about the difference in length of video. I loved how before she mentioned that we have the attention span of a goldfish, which unfortunately I would love to say I'm better than the attention span of a goldfish, but I am not. And I'd say that's probably about the same kind of length of time that I'm able to keep up with stuff, even in the TikTok, the Instagram, the real world. It's about where I live. But we'll kind of dive a little bit more into video, how things have changed, the platforms you should use on. And then, of course, social. I am a content consumer myself. I'm also putting out a lot of content at Housing Wire, but I'd highly recommend in this day and age, not only taking all this information that I'm sharing here, but there's so much information out there that you can tap into on the latest trends because it is constantly changing. Something I follow pretty closely is the Hootsuite Trends of 2022. They just released their latest report, had a giant webinar on the things that you need to follow. And one big theme over the last year, as people are coming out of COVID, kind of going back into this hybrid virtual world, is this the new idea of content creators. I think this still very much applies to the people here, no matter what size your business is. There's been this new shift that there's people in your brand, there's people in your business who are creators themselves and tapping into them to also share the social. So social can be your marketing department, social can be your sales department, but it's also, you have a whole wheelhouse of team members and people working with you who are also representative of your brand. And then there's also yourself. I think part of this game plan and action isn't just saying, how can I take this back to my company, but how can you make yourself a thought leader? I've done a lot of ghostwriting over the years or social media posts for thought leaders, and they're just as much of a brand, the CEO, your executive suite, your senior leadership team, to an entry-level employee. Everyone has the potential to be a brand in themselves. And instead of looking at it as just the company's brand, I would encourage everyone to start looking at people within the company saying, who here could also be a brand in themselves. So going on to the next slide. Okay. I wanted to start with this slide because I think it's just as important as everything else. I wanted kind of a funny story. We were doing a webinar a while back, and I noticed in this camera the idea of having it mirrored to like opposite of what you used to or the normal way. And we had a guy who's pretty famous on social media, has about 200,000 followers. And even him at his stated age was very adamant about needing his video mirrored. We're so used to seeing our face a certain way. We didn't want to change. But I emphasize that because I think there's so much importance in how you present yourself. And no matter where you fall on the influencer scale or the creator scale, we all really care about how we're presenting ourselves and how we're showing ourselves. For anyone who doesn't know who Renee Rodriguez is, I'd highly recommend him. He's kind of a leadership coach in the mortgage space, in the housing space, and even beyond. But he has this quote with the shift of the pandemic. He was recently on one of our podcasts, and he says, it doesn't matter how good your message is if nobody can hear it. And I want to emphasize that because if you are just sitting in front of your computer screen with a dark camera or a very, a background that is way busier than you, so people are distracted looking around everything behind you, that it's going to take away from your message. Or if you don't have good Wi-Fi, or if things are happening, a lot of loud noises out and about, you don't have a good microphone or a good camera, you could say everything that you want, but no one's going to hear it technically because you don't have the right system. So I would emphasize the importance of just having the basic things here. I included kind of a list, and I noticed back in the chat, if you go back when I think Greg was talking, some people were asking about, what camera equipment does he use? What lighting? I don't think it has to be anything fancy. In front of me, which you guys can't see, I just have a ring light. It's $20 off of Amazon. It's also very portable. We are now in a hybrid world where we're traveling a lot more. We're going to conferences, but we still have these virtual events. And so we're not fully leaving the virtual world. If you still set up your system, it's something that you can take with you when you are traveling or when you are working or just visiting family in this new remote world that we live in. Can you bring your ring light with you? Do you have a good camera on your computer, a good camera on your phone? Do you have a good background behind you? This background that I have, back when Wayne's seen me with my previous background before we bought a house, but I specifically painted this wall black, set this little stand here and lamp on this side for the sole purpose of having a Zoom background. I spend a lot of time in front of the camera, talking to people, having to present for work or interviewing people. That to me, being able to reactively create a background, since I didn't have an office pre-pandemic, I was able to make a home office that fit the requirements or what people are kind of looking for when it comes to this remote virtual world. So I'd highly recommend just having those basic things. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then also I have these questions to the right, which is, what are you trying to accomplish? Who's your target audience? What tools are you currently using? For example, content can be a podcast. If you're trying to go into the podcast world, do you want a Yeti microphone? Do you want to video yourself as you're doing it? Do you have the software on your computer in order to do that? So maybe you want a little bit nicer of a Yeti mic. Another thing that I maybe convinced my husband was the need for a 4K camera on my phone. I wanted it to be something simple that I could move around with me. I could take higher quality videos when I go to conferences. I can use my phone if I'm interviewing someone in their office. And so this was very portable and something you could bring along with me without having to bring a full camera setup. And that goes along with maybe your phone stands, your camera stands, your computer stands. What are the small kind of bundles that you need in order to reach the audience or the platform that you're trying to use? So spending a lot of time here because I think system is important. On to the next slide. So what makes content good? I don't think anyone's a stranger to Gary Vaynerchuk. He has a very great example I would highlight here as someone that you should go follow and watch. But I want to emphasize the three things that I think make good content. One, his quote fits perfectly to point number one, which is consistency. People's lack of patience with building exposure is why most people don't have any. That applies to so many things outside of social media. That can apply to starting a band, that can apply to starting your workout plan. If you're not patient with it and you're not consistent with it, it's not going to happen overnight. And that is extremely true when it comes to content. Consistency is key. And then authenticity. And I put these into 3 bullet points because I don't think you need to overthink it. My hope is that this is something that you can either quickly apply to your own personal brand, to an employee brand, or add on to some of the marketing things that you already have in place. So consistency, authenticity, and engagement. When you go to authenticity is more important. And it's one of the top words kind of being used right now when it comes to content, because for the first time, kind of, if you look at this COVID world, we've seen a lot more of a relationship with creators and a relationship with influencers, a relationship with brands. Community is more important than ever. I wanted to highlight an example here. If anyone, so I specialize kind of in the mortgage finance industry. There's a guy that I highly recommend following. His name's Brian Covey, Brian Brian, and then Covey Covey. If you go look at what he decided to make his brand, it's a lot about, he used to be a professional soccer player. It's about, fitness. There's a very big, professional element, but then an even bigger kind of family element. And if you looked at his social profile, you'd be like, he's good at posting about family. That's clearly what his thing is. But what's unique about him, and where to me the word authentic comes in, is if you actually talk to Brian and you asked him, hey, Brian, hey, we have a conference coming up. We'd love for you to speak at it. He will tell you, no, I can't attend that because I have my daughter's, X conference game coming up, or I can't make that. I already planned a family trip here. That authenticity can be so many things, but it's also living the brand that you have. So don't put something out there if it's not also something that you're kind of walking and living in real life, which is what I mean by authentic. Personally, I would love it if I was the funniest person in the world. I would love if my brand could be cornerstone and founded on humor. Unfortunately, I'm not the funniest person. It's not going to be the type of person that I kind of put out there. And then the third one is engagement. You can be as consistent as you want and as authentic as you want, but if you're not consistently engaging with the content that you're putting out there, you're not going to build that community. Engagement is if you post something on, if you post a post on LinkedIn and you're not commenting and responding to people on there, you're not really talking to anybody. You want to talk to the people who are engaging with you. If you post a video on YouTube, are you liking the comments? If you are sharing a podcast, are you reading those podcast reviews on the podcast episode and shouting out your listeners? If you have an email, do you have a CTA where you're asking people for a call to action to respond to you? Like, what do you guys think about this shift to, or how busy the housing market is? What do you guys think about the giant amount of offers coming in? That is something that you can easily shift into a way for engagement, not just something where it's a one-way communication. Community goes right back into this entire conversation. Okay, on to the next slide. This one's pretty simple. I wanted to emphasize, okay, we now know what we need to do. We need to be consistent, authentic. We need to have engagement. Where do I get started? Gary Vee, I think, is very much a great king when it comes to quickly just get started, put content out there. You need to give yourself the chance to test things. And so he highly emphasizes this idea of have a manifesto. What makes you unique? What is your company's mission? What is your company trying to make different? What are you trying? What is your thought leadership compared to everyone else's thought leadership? And then go into content. What is the first piece of content that you want to deploy? Is it a video? Do you want to start a podcast? Is it a blog? Is it a newsletter? Figure out what that first thing that you want to do to deploy is and act there, and then distribution. He emphasizes the importance of time versus money. If you don't have money, time is just as important when it comes to this. It's not something that happens overnight. My version of that is pick a platform, whichever one you want to do. I'll give the example of I'm a very big LinkedIn person. At the very end of this, I have a QR code to my LinkedIn. It's a platform for me that has the highest engagement. And then after that would be Twitter and like Facebook groups. After you pick a platform, then make a content calendar. This goes back to consistency and revisit your content calendar weekly. It's something that you constantly need to revise. Where are you guys going? Are you attending a conference? Are you doing a virtual conference? And you can snap a picture of you attending it. Are you reading a thought leadership book? There's so many different things that you can apply from your everyday life and put it into the content world. Just the other day, I had to take over our podcast for work. Needed a lot more of a soundproof studio. So I went down to my husband's studio downstairs because he's a musician and used that instead. There was drums everywhere. There's studio foam, not your typical home office, but it makes a perfect post of, hey, this is me in my home, still related to work, a little bit of personal brand to it. My dogs were involved. Who doesn't love a dog photo at the end of the day? Love my dogs. And made that as my LinkedIn post. I think it's an easy way to figure out what are you doing in your day-to-day life, and how can you make a post out of it. And then number 3, I'm going to emphasize this one, is follow people who are doing this well. In the next slide, I'm going to ask people in the chat to put some examples of those people that you follow. Sometimes for me, the best way to learn, and for other people, is to look at the people who are doing it well. We've noticed a very big uptick in people wanting to figure out how to use TikTok, which is probably why I keep kind of going back and referencing it, and something that's included in the stat below when it comes to Hootsuite. But TikTok is a great example of a platform that you just don't join to join. And that's true for any platform. Each one is built differently. And if you want to have any success on that platform, one, it's great because it's still, the algorithm works where people can still pretty much go viral on it, depending on what you're putting, posting regularly. But you don't just jump on that platform and post whatever you want. You need to spend hours really figuring out what the trends are going on. One person I'd recommend following is that mortgage guy. His name's Scott Betley. He's on TikTok, has almost 1 million followers on that platform, but he spends 20 hours a week on that platform trying to figure out what the trends are. So it's not something that you just go on and say, I posted this on Facebook, I want to post on TikTok right now. The trends on that platform are changing rapidly, that if you're not trying to plug in and be authentic and be a native on that platform, is just not going to drive well. So that's something I'd highly emphasize. Figure out the people on that platform that you could follow and embody and take tips from, because odds are they're already doing 20 hours of work. Maybe you can pull a little bit off of that. And since they're doing the heavy lifting, you could do 10 hours instead. But a great place to start. And the fourth one I would say is test, especially when it comes to just you and your individual brand or your workers or even your company, is figure out if, if Facebook is a place for you. Is it Facebook video? Is it stories? Figure out one thing to post and then try another one. There's nothing that really should be out of the question right now, and find different pieces of content that work for you and engage, and until you figure out the right place or the right style for your brand. The quote that I put in the bottom, I think, is really interesting and important to emphasize. I know there's different types of businesses on this kind of chat right now. And so they kind of talk about how while most people were active on Facebook, only 24% was highly effective, opposed to the people who decided to look at, so the survey found that the more established the social network was, the less effective the small business had on it. So you're looking at your new entrant platforms. I know I talked about TikTok a bit, but another big platform that's been growing in popularity, even though it's been around for a bit, is Pinterest. Pinterest is another platform where right now, I know I go over there to figure out inspiration for work outfits, or I go over there to find inspiration for my living room and how it should look, or motivational quotes. It's just a platform that is growing, that's not as established when it comes to everyday posts, that more small businesses are finding a lot more potential or effectiveness on it. So on to the next slide. I would love for on this one, for those who are sticking with us in the chat, love to call, I'm in a kind of a group right now and they make the chat fire, make it hype in a way. But basically, if you guys are able to, or if you have ideas, I think it's really important to share examples of the people that you're following. So if there's someone on social media that you think is a great person to follow, if you think there's an email chain or a great person that has a content hub, feel free to drop that in the chat as a way for everyone else here to learn and listen and kind of follow the people who are doing things well. I'll list a couple of examples that I think are really notable, and then you guys kind of go from there. But a big one I would say is, I mentioned Scott, the mortgage guy. He's on TikTok. Really great person to follow if you want to figure out the trends and how to jump into TikTok. It's a solid place to go. Another one I would emphasize is Brian Covey, who I said. I'd also emphasize when it comes to blogs and videos, Neil, I'll spell his name. It's Neeldhinga, Neeldhinga. He's a great person when it comes to video. If you want to figure out, your YouTube Plus should be 2 minutes long. If you're on Instagram, it should be 30 seconds. If you're on TikTok, it can be a minute. How should you film and create good video that actually drives engagement? He's a great person for that. I'd emphasize when it comes to email, there's a lot of people out there doing kind of the Substack world of people who are now a personality in the email. I'd also kind of pitch our own email. We have an email called Lending Life, which is just catering straight to the lending audience, LOs, people like that. If you check out that email, it has a really good two-way conversation. So it's a common place where they're asking the industry, hey, what are your thoughts on this? We heard this trend. What do you think about that? That's something I think could apply to you, any type of audience. What are you guys seeing in the housing market? What are you guys seeing in your brand? A two-way conversation type thing. So follow those people. They're really good examples of how others are doing it in this space. And then also ask other people for suggestions, who they like, who they want to follow, and so forth. Okay. This next slide is more of an idea brainstorm. I wanted to spend a little bit of time here kind of helping, since it is a workshop, a content workshop, using this time to plan through one idea. If you're going to do one thing right now, I'll walk through one example that I have. If you guys are taking notes, promise yourself right now one piece of content that you're going to post for yourself, one piece of content that you have for your brand or your idea, and go from there. But I think starting off, what is your manifesto? What is your brand goal? What are you trying to share? On my Twitter, which is at Brena Nath, I always say that I post about housing and mortgage snippets. Okay, so that's kind of my manifesto, as I talk about mortgage snippets, the housing industry, and the community within that. Then I want you guys to think of, okay, what are you going to do when it comes to consistency? How many times, make yourself a goal for this is your manifesto. How many times this week are you going to post? So are you going to post on this platform 2 times? Are you going to post 3 TikToks this week? Are you going to post, 2 tweets this week? My example that I'm going to try to jump onto is get into the TikTok world. So I would say my manifesto on TikTok is going to be work and housing, because that's still kind of my brand. And then I'll try to post 3 TikToks this week. After that, you have consistency, then you have authenticity. Authenticity goes back to your brand. So mine is being true to who I am when it comes to the leaderships and the thoughts that I have in the mortgage space. So figure out what your authentic, like what does authenticity mean to you, and then engagement. So for me, that's going back and commenting on other people that I follow. So I would go to Scott the mortgage guy, I would like and comment on his brand. I'd find there's a whole bunch of real estate agents out there right now on the platform. I'd go follow them, I'd comment on their TikToks. I'd go to maybe some of the financial people on the platform, go follow them, like see what they're doing. And if you think someone's not doing it and you think, oh, it doesn't fit your field, I promise you there's someone in your field doing it. I was at a conference the other day trying to explain to this lady that there's a whole world of home inspection TikTok, which is basically people going into the home, showing the different ways someone has flipped a home and maybe didn't fully go all the way when it comes to flipping the home per se. And so that's a whole nother brand that you could do, or you could share whatever it is. I think every industry has a home and has a space on it. And then I'm going to kind of go to this last one since we are kind of getting short on time here. But I wanted to, this is my QR code for my LinkedIn. That's my place, my hub for a lot of content. Also an easy way to get a hold of me. But I think there's a lot here that we just kind of uncovered. I'd say some big high level takeaways is I don't think you need to overthink anything here. Get started. As long as you're authentic, you're engaging with the content, and you're consistent, you need to give yourself the opportunity to grow the brand and test out everything that you do. And then I would also say, whether you're hiring someone dedicated for it or finding people internally, there are so many opportunities within your company for someone who could lead this charge, whether it's you, whether it's someone who's already pretty active, whether you're hiring someone, or as I would just reaffirm this idea of a third party. If you want to work with Bo Digital, another great place for someone who is an expert who can dive into these things and follow the trends. And then once they're testing out, actually give you back the information. Because a lot of what I focused on here is simply getting started. It's starting off square one. Where can you post a blog? Where can you post some content? And then going from there. There's so much more beyond that, but hopefully this gives you a good roadmap on where to get started. Okay.
That was great.
Thanks, Wade. It was great being here. It's always a joy to talk about content.
Most people may not know that Brena used to write with Bo Digital, so that's why we know that she's such a rock star at Housing Wire. But you can see it every day if you go to housingwire.com. Like I said before, subscribe, get involved with HW Plus, listen to the podcast, do all the things, follow all the people. She knows everybody.
All the
it's really
things.
good. We did have one question, Brena, if that's okay, before you jet off here. Somebody asked Andrea Robinson asked, how often should you be communicating to your team internally? And I have a thought here, but I wonder what you think or what you've heard from others over the years.
Yeah. And I would maybe, how I'm interpreting the question is, how often should you send, letting your internal team know what's going on, or the social plan that you guys kind of have going on? To me, I think it should be a top of mind conversation. A lot of people put content on maybe a back burner. I think Wayne and I have talked a lot about it. Should it be a back burner priority? It should be a top of mind priority. I put in one of my chats that it should be, the content calendar should be a weekly meeting. I stand by that. I think what's happening is constantly changing, and what's happening in the world is constantly changing. So you always need to be having it, kind of talking at top of mind. When it comes to email communication, we use Slack. So it's more of like a chat platform for constant updates, which I would recommend versus maybe an internal email. So I would maybe shift depending on how urgent, or talking about the content calendar. I'd say it just needs to be pretty regular. What would your thoughts be, Wayne?
Like most things in marketing, my quick answer is ask. I think that there is a world where there's too much communication, and I think people have their own thoughts, and sometimes I know you've got to get it in front of them. But I think Brenna's right with like using Slack and other tools. I think decide what the method of communication could be, because maybe nobody wants email communication, but if you're going to do, like I do, a video update to our team every single morning, sometimes it's 30 seconds and I'm like, there's not really that much happening. A couple days ago it was 8 minutes long. So it's a little bit of everything, but I think ask and figure out what works for you and for your team. And I think whatever you decide, it doesn't have to stay that way for a long time. I think if you have to change it after 1 month, then you keep, like everything else, you keep evolving.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, we will send around Brenna's presentation, slides, and everything, and contact info after when we do everything else post-event. But thank you so much, Brena. We appreciate you being here today. As always, it was good to see your face.
Thanks.
All right. We are going to go ahead and take a quick 10-minute break. We have a break before we have a session on marketing your culture inside and out with Lisa Steele and Leslie Wyatt, which, knowing those two, it's going to be full of laughs, and you guys will definitely want to be involved in the chat on that one. And otherwise, we will be back in 10 minutes. We'll come back at 11:32 Eastern to start that session. And otherwise, thanks so much.